The shot rang out across the valley, echoing off the sandstone walls like thunder. Jack Sawyer pressed himself flat against the rock face, his weathered hand instinctively reaching for the Winchester 73 slung across his back. Blood trickled down his cheek where a bullet had carved a shallow path through his flesh. Three riders crested the ridge above, silhouetted against the merciless Arizona sun. Jack counted seconds, measured breaths. 42 years of living had taught him patience. 15 of those years spent as a Union scout during the war had taught him survival. "I know you're down there, Sawyer," the voice carried on the hot wind. "Nobody refuses Marcus Harrington and lives to brag about it." Jack's jaw tightened. The butcher of Antietam, they'd called Harrington during the war. The man had ordered the execution of a dozen civilian prisoners, women and children among them, and gotten away with it because of his family connections in Washington. Now he led the Black Canyon Gang, leaving a trail of blood across the territory. "I'll die before I help you rob that bank, Harrington," Jack called back, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "Innocent people's money. I'm done with that life." Bullets peppered the rock wall, sending stone fragments flying. Jack ducked lower, calculating his odds. 3 against 1. He'd faced worse in the Sonora mines when the supports gave way, burying 15 men alive. Jack had testified against the mine owners who ignored the warning signs. That testimony made him a marked man. Jack waited for a lull in the gunfire, then rolled to a new position. The Winchester came up smooth as silk. One shot, one rider tumbled from his horse, the others scattered, diving for cover. "I've got all day, boys," Jack called, chambering another round, "and a full box of ammunition." A tense silence settled over the canyon like a shroud. Jack seized the opportunity, slipping away through a narrow fissure in the rock wall. His horse, a sturdy Appaloosa mare, waited patiently in a hidden ravine. With practiced efficiency, Jack checked the cinch, adjusted his saddlebags, and prepared to ride. That's when he saw it. Blood on the sand, boot prints scattered, signs of a struggle. His eyes narrowed, following the trail down into a dry arroyo. There, propped against the embankment, sat a woman. Her dark eyes tracked his approach with the wariness of a wounded wolf. Blood had dried on her shoulder and down her sleeve, staining the intricately beaded leather of her clothing. Apache, Jack realized, and in trouble. "I'm not looking for more problems," he said, keeping his voice low, hands visible. "Then keep walking." Her English carried the rhythm of her native tongue, clear but edged with pain and suspicion. Jack studied her wound, the pallor of her skin. She wouldn't survive another day without help. He'd seen enough death to last several lifetimes. "Name's Jack," he said, crouching at a respectful distance. "That needs tending." Her eyes never left his face. "I am Ahiga." Jack nodded once, acknowledgement rather than greeting. He reached slowly for his saddlebag, retrieving a clean cloth and a small tin of carbolic. "Army surgeon taught me to stitch wounds during the war. I've had plenty of practice since." Her expression remained impassive, but Jack caught the flicker of calculation in her eyes, weighing death against trusting a stranger. "You can shoot me if I try anything stupid," he offered, placing his revolver on the ground between them. A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "I don't need your gun to kill you." Jack believed her. The sun had begun its descent when hoofbeats approached, sending dust clouds billowing over the arroyo's edge. Jack's hand moved to the Winchester, his body tensing. Ahiga shifted despite the pain, her hand finding a knife hidden in her boot. 2 riders appeared at the arroyo's entrance. The lead man wore a black hat, expensive despite the dust coating it. His face carried the scars of countless fights, but his eyes held something worse, emptiness where a soul should be. "Well now," he drawled, "what have we here? A drifter and a savage." Jack recognized him immediately, Marcus Harrington. Beside him rode a snake-eyed man with a pock-marked face, hand hovering near his pistol. "We're just passing through," Jack said evenly, finger resting lightly on the Winchester's trigger guard. Harrington's cold eyes fixed on Ahiga. "That Apache bitch is wanted. She saw something she shouldn't have." His hand moved toward his holster. "Hand her over, and maybe I forget about our disagreement earlier." Jack didn't move. "She's under my protection now." The words surprised him as much as they did Harrington, whose face darkened with rage. "You know, Sawyer, I remember you at Antietam, always questioning orders, always soft." Harrington spat on the ground. "Those civilians would have died anyway. I just made it quicker." The memory flashed through Jack's mind. The farmhouse near the creek, the family huddled inside, Harrington ordering his men to open fire. Jack had testified at the hearing afterward, but Harrington's family connections had buried the incident. "You're making a mistake, Sawyer." "Wouldn't be my first." Jack raised the Winchester with practiced smoothness. "But you'll make your last if you draw that pistol." For a moment, the only sound was the hot desert wind. Then Harrington laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "The Black Canyon boys will be mighty interested to hear Jack Sawyer's gone soft for an Apache." He turned his horse. "We'll see you again, Sawyer. Count on it." As the riders disappeared, Jack lowered his rifle, his mind racing. Whatever Ahiga had witnessed had put her in Harrington's sights, and now him too. "What did you see?" he asked, turning to her. Ahiga's eyes held his for a long moment. "Harrington and his men. They massacred a small village of my people 3 days ago. Killed everyone. Children, elders. I was hunting. Returned to find—" Her voice didn't break, but something in her eyes did. "I tracked them. Watched them divide what they stole." Jack's jaw tightened. He'd heard rumors of attacks on Apache settlements, blamed on rogue warriors. Now he understood. Harrington creating conflicts, using the chaos as cover for his crimes. "There's an abandoned army outpost a day's ride east," Jack said. "We can find shelter there. Time to heal that wound properly." He packed his supplies, movement sufficient. "Can you ride?" "I have survived worse," she said simply. As they mounted up, Ahiga behind him on the Appaloosa, Jack saw movement on the distant ridge. Harrington and at least 6 riders watching them. "They'll be coming," he said. Ahiga's voice was steel against his shoulder. "Then we will be ready." Jack urged the horse forward. 2 strangers bound by circumstance and a common enemy. Behind them, the setting sun painted the desert blood red, a promise of what was to come. Dawn broke harsh across the desert, light slicing through the scattered clouds like a butcher's blade. Jack led the Appaloosa through a narrow ravine, choosing paths that would hide their tracks from all but the most skilled trackers. The outpost lay ahead, its adobe walls bleached bone-white against the rusted landscape. Ahiga sat straight behind him despite her wound, eyes constantly scanning the terrain. She had not complained once during the night's hard ride. Jack had known battle-hardened soldiers with less fortitude. "Army abandoned this place after the war," Jack explained as they approached. "Supply route changed, too remote to maintain." The outpost stood silent, surrounded by the skeletal remains of a wooden corral. Its roof had partially collapsed on one side, but the walls were intact. A defensive position, if it came to that. Jack dismounted first, Winchester ready. "Stay here," he told Ahiga, though he suspected she'd ignore him if danger appeared. He approached cautiously, senses alert for any sign of ambush. The wooden door hung askew on rusted hinges. Jack pushed it open with the barrel of his rifle, stepping into the musty darkness. Movement. A shadow lunged from the corner. Jack pivoted, the Winchester coming up, finger tensing on the trigger. "Hold your fire! Jesus Christ!" The figure stumbled into a shaft of light from the broken roof. A man with graying hair and a beard streaked with silver. Blood stained his shirt around his left shoulder. Recognition hit Jack like a physical blow. Frank? Frank Murphy? The man squinted. Then his weathered face split in a disbelieving grin. Sawyer? Jack Sawyer? God almighty, I thought you were dead. Frank Murphy. They'd served together in the war, part of the same scout unit, the only other survivor from their ambush at Chancellorsville. What the hell happened to you? Jack asked, lowering his rifle and stepping forward to examine his old comrade's wound. Ran afoul of the Black Canyon boys, Frank grimaced, recognized their leader as that bastard Harrington from the war. He recognized me too. Tried to put a bullet in my heart for testifying against him at that hearing. Jack's jaw tightened. Seems Harrington's collecting enemies. You too, huh? Frank chuckled, then winced at the pain it caused. Jack nodded toward the door. Got company outside. Apache woman. Harrington's after her too. She witnessed him massacring her village. Frank's expression darkened. He's been doing that across the territory, creating incidents, stirring up trouble between settlers and tribes, cover for his robberies. He's after something specific, Jack said. This isn't random banditry. Gold, Frank confirmed. There's rumors of an Apache treasure cache in these mountains, but it's not what he thinks. Jack helped Frank to a bench, then went to bring Ahiga inside. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of another white man. But she said nothing as Jack introduced them. Frank served with me in the war, Jack explained. He's running from Harrington too. Ahiga studied the older man carefully before giving a slight nod. The enemy of my enemy, she said simply. Let me look at that wound properly, Jack said to her. Then you can tend to Frank's. As the day progressed, they reinforced the outpost. Jack repaired the roof with salvaged wood, while Frank, his shoulder bandage, established firing positions at each window. Ahiga set subtle traps around the perimeter, warnings that would alert them to approach. Harrington's been working with someone in the settlements, Frank said as they worked, getting information on Apache movements, settler caravans, someone connected. Jack frowned. James Cooper, maybe? The territory's most successful trader had always struck Jack as too smooth, too convenient in his business dealings. Could be, Frank nodded. Cooper's got access to everyone. Settlers, military, even some tribes that still trade. Perfect position to feed information to someone like Harrington. In the evening, they shared a meager meal of jerky and hardtack from Jack's saddlebags. The fire cast long shadows against the adobe walls as Frank recounted what he knew. Harrington's gathering men, not just outlaws, some former soldiers who served under him. Loyal dogs who'll follow any order. Frank's voice carried the weight of bitter memories. He's obsessed with finding this Apache treasure. Claims it'll make them all rich men. Ahiga spoke without looking up from the knife she was sharpening. The white man's idea of treasure is not always correct. Jack raised an eyebrow. You know something about this? Her eyes met his, measuring, deciding. Finally, she nodded. My father was chief before the massacre. He protected our people's secret. Now I am the only one left who knows. What secret? Frank asked. After your civil war, many weapons disappeared. Some found their way to my people through Mexican traders. Enough to arm many warriors? Ahiga's voice remained steady. My father hid them, knowing they would bring only death if discovered. He believed peace was possible. He was wrong. Jack exchanged glances with Frank. Modern weapons in Harrington's hands would mean more bloodshed, more innocent lives lost. The territory marshal couldn't stop him. Harrington had connections in Washington, protection from powerful men who had shared his wartime sins. Harrington won't stop coming, Jack said. He'll bring his full force next time. Frank nodded grimly. 8 men at least, all killers. Then we prepare, Jack said, his decision made. The path of running was over. They spent the next day setting defenses, making ammunition from Frank's bullet molds and Jack's supply of powder and lead. Ahiga taught them how to create disguised pits filled with sharpened stakes, deadly to horse and rider alike. As sunset approached, Ahiga stood at the outpost door, her keen eyes fixed on the western horizon. Jack joined her, the Winchester a comfortable weight in his hands. "My people believe a warrior's spirit shows itself before battle," she said quietly. "I see yours, Jack Sawyer. It is old and scarred, but unbroken." Jack remained silent, watching the sun sink toward the mountains. "Why do you help me?" Ahiga asked. "Your kind rarely stand with mine." Jack considered his answer carefully. "I've spent too many years walking away. Sonora Mines. 15 men dead because good men did nothing. I testified, but it changed nothing. The owners walked free." He felt the familiar weight of those deaths pressing down. "I'm tired of walking away." Ahiga nodded once, understanding in her eyes. The attack came at dawn. Frank spotted them first, riders approaching from the south, dust billowing behind them. Jack counted through his spyglass. Harrington and 7 men, heavily armed. "Remember the plan," Jack said, taking position at the north window. Frank covered the east, Ahiga the west. "Let them come to us." The riders split into 2 groups, circling the outpost like wolves. Harrington's voice carried across the yard. "Sawyer! Murphy! I know you're in there with the Apache witch. Come out now and I'll make it quick." Jack exchanged glances with his companions. No one moved. A shot rang out, splintering the wooden frame near Jack's head. He ducked, then raised the Winchester and returned fire. One of Harrington's men tumbled from his saddle. The battle erupted in earnest. Bullets punched through the adobe walls, sending clouds of dust into the air. Jack fired methodically, making each shot count. Frank's revolver barked steadily from his position. Ahiga moved silently between them, loading spare weapons, tending a flesh wound on Frank's arm when a bullet grazed him. 2 of Harrington's men attempted to reach the door. One triggered Ahiga's trap, his screams cutting short as sharpened stakes found their mark. The other fell to Jack's precise shot. Hours passed in a haze of gun smoke and adrenaline. Harrington's force had been reduced by half, but they'd pinned down the defenders. Ammunition was running low. "We need to move," Jack said during a lull in the firing. "They'll rush us when they realize we're running out of bullets." Frank checked his revolver. 2 shots left. "I'll cover you both. Give you time to reach the ravine." Jack recognized the look in his old friend's eyes. "We go together or not at all?" Frank shook his head, a tired smile crossing his face. "Some debts can only be paid one way, Jack. I've carried mine since Chancellorsville." He gripped Jack's shoulder with surprising strength. "Let me do this right. Let me finish with honor." Before Jack could argue, a massive explosion rocked the outpost. The south wall collapsed inward, sending debris flying. Harrington had used dynamite. "Go!" Frank shouted, pushing himself to his feet and moving toward the breach, firing his remaining bullets. Jack grabbed Ahiga's arm, pulling her toward the back door. They burst into the open air as Frank's final shot rang out, followed by the thunder of return fire. Neither looked back. The Appaloosa waited where Jack had hidden her in a stand of scrub pine. They mounted quickly, Jack urging the horse up a steep trail into the hills. Gunfire continued behind them, then stopped abruptly. Jack knew what that silence meant. Frank Murphy had paid his debt. They rode hard through the day, putting miles between themselves and the outpost. Jack pushed onward through fatigue, grief fueling his determination. The canyon he sought lay ahead, a natural fortress where one man could hold off an army if he knew the terrain. As dusk fell, they made camp in a sheltered overhang. Jack tended the Appaloosa, while Ahiga gathered wood for a small, smokeless fire. Neither had spoken since their escape. Finally, Ahiga broke the silence. "Your friend died well, a warrior's death." Jack nodded, throat tight. Frank always said there were worse ways to go than facing your enemy. Harrington will follow, she said, not a question, but a certainty. Let him come. Jack checked the Winchester's action by firelight. This ends at the canyon. Ahiga studied him across the flames. I have not told you everything about the weapons cache. Her eyes reflected the fire as she continued. It is not just rifles. There are many crates, enough to arm 200 warriors. Explosives, too. My father believed they would destroy our people if we used them. Jack stared at her, understanding the magnitude of what Harrington sought. That's why he's so determined. With an arsenal like that, he could wage his own war, Ahiga finished. The night deepened around them, stars emerging like silver bullets against the black velvet of the sky. Tomorrow would bring Harrington, and with him, a reckoning long overdue. Jack Sawyer had spent his life running from the past. Now he would turn and face it, Winchester in hand, alongside the unlikeliest of allies. The canyon walls rose like sentinels on either side, ancient red stone carved by wind and time into natural battlements. Jack led Ahiga through the narrow entrance, where the passage was barely wide enough for a single rider. The space opened gradually into a hidden valley, a fortress crafted by nature herself. A spring bubbled from the rock face at the canyon's heart, feeding a small pool surrounded by cottonwoods. Jack had discovered this place years ago, after Sonora. He'd spent 6 months here, healing from wounds both visible and hidden. We make our stand here, he said, dismounting near the pool. One way in, one way out. High ground all around for cover. Ahiga surveyed the canyon with approval. A good place to fight. Better to die. Jack unloaded supplies from the Appaloosa. I don't plan on dying today. No man does, Ahiga replied simply. They worked methodically through the morning, preparing defenses. Jack positioned rifles at strategic points around the canyon. Ahiga set more traps along the entrance path, subtle disturbances in the soil that would alert them to intruders. By midday, the sun blazed overhead, turning the canyon into a furnace. Jack wiped sweat from his brow, checking his ammunition one final time. The Winchester, 2 Colt revolvers, a shotgun for close work. The weapons, Ahiga said, motioning for him to follow. I will show you now. She led him to a seemingly solid rock face on the canyon's north side. With practiced movements, she located handholds invisible to the untrained eye and climbed 15 feet up to a narrow ledge. Jack followed, muscles protesting after days of hard riding and fighting. The cave entrance was concealed behind a curtain of hanging vines. Inside, the air felt cool and damp. As Jack's eyes adjusted to the darkness, he froze in shock. Wooden crates filled the cavern, stacked nearly to the ceiling in some places. Each bore stenciled U.S. Army markings. There were dozens, far more than Jack had imagined. My God, Jack whispered, his voice echoing softly. There must be hundreds of rifles here. And these, Ahiga said, moving deeper into the cave. She pulled a tarp from another stack of crates. Explosives, enough to level a mountain. Jack pried open the nearest crate. Springfield rifles, pristine and deadly, packed in protective grease. Another held Colt revolvers. A third contained ammunition boxes, modern weapons, deadly accurate in the right hands. Your father was wise to hide these, Jack said. They would have brought only death to your people. And now? Ahiga asked. Before Jack could answer, a sound reached them from below, the distant click of metal on stone. Jack motioned for silence, drawing his revolver. They crept to the cave entrance, peering through the vines. A man stood by the spring, drinking deeply from cupped hands. James Cooper, the territory's most successful trader, and apparently Harrington's spy. Jack's mind raced. Cooper supplied every settlement within 100 miles. He traveled freely between towns, army outposts, and occasionally native encampments when permitted. The perfect informant for someone like Harrington. Jack descended silently, Ahiga following like a shadow. They were within 20 feet of Cooper when the traitor sensed their presence and whirled around, reaching for a hidden pistol. I wouldn't, Jack said. The Colt aimed steadily at Cooper's chest. Cooper froze, then slowly raised his hands. Sawyer, should have known you'd hole up in a place like this. How'd you find us? Jack demanded. Cooper's smile never reached his eyes. Followed your track from the outpost. Wasn't hard. You were in a hurry. He glanced at Ahiga. Harrington's offering good money for both of you, dead or alive. And you thought you'd collect? Jack stepped closer, keeping the revolver trained on Cooper's heart. Just business, Cooper shrugged. Nothing personal. It's personal to me, Ahiga said, her knife appearing in her hand. Your business partner killed my entire family. Cooper's facade cracked slightly. Look, I just point Harrington toward opportunities. What he does with that information isn't my concern. Where is he? Jack asked. Close, real close. Cooper's eyes darted toward the canyon entrance. He and his remaining men are maybe an hour behind me. Sent me ahead to scout. Jack considered his options. Killing Cooper would be simple, justified even, but the man might still have value. You're going to help us, Jack decided, and if you try to warn Harrington when he arrives, I'll put a bullet in you myself. Cooper swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing. What choice do I have? None, Ahiga said coldly. They bound Cooper to a cottonwood near the spring, visible to anyone entering the canyon. Jack positioned himself on a high ledge overlooking the entrance. Winchester ready. Ahiga disappeared among the rocks on the opposite side, becoming one with the shadows. The waiting stretched Jack's nerves taut as bowstrings. He controlled his breathing, settling into the stillness as he'd learned to do during long scouting missions in the war. Patient, watchful, ready. The sun had begun its western descent when Jack heard them, hoofbeats approaching the canyon mouth. He peered through his spyglass. Harrington led 3 riders into the narrow passage, the remaining men of the Black Canyon gang, each a killer in his own right. Jack recognized Harrington's lieutenant, Billy Snake Norton, a sharpshooter rumored to have killed 20 men in cold blood. Beside him rode the Cleaver brothers, massive twins whose specialty was a knife work at close range. As the riders entered the canyon proper, Cooper called out from his position by the spring. Harrington, over here! Jack tensed, finger resting lightly on the Winchester's trigger, ready if Cooper betrayed them. Cooper? Harrington reined in his horse, suspicious eyes scanning the canyon walls. Where's Sawyer and the Apache? Cooper licked his lips nervously. They caught me scouting ahead, tied me up and headed deeper into the canyon. Some kind of cave system back there. His eyes flicked upward, almost imperceptibly, toward Jack's position. A warning. Jack shifted the Winchester's aim as Harrington dismounted, approaching Cooper with measured steps. And I'm supposed to believe they left you alive out of the kindness of their hearts? Cooper's expression changed, his actor's mask slipping. Now! He shouted. Jack fired as Harrington drew his revolver, the bullet striking rock inches from the gang leader's head. The Black Canyon boys scattered, diving for cover. From across the canyon, Ahiga's rifle cracked twice. One of the Cleaver brothers dropped, clutching his leg. Norton returned fire, bullets chipping stone near Jack's position. I know you're up there, Sawyer, Harrington bellowed, sheltering behind a boulder. You can't win this. Throw down your weapons and I'll make it quick. Jack chambered another round. Like you did for Frank Murphy? Murphy was a fool, Harrington called back. Just like you. The firefight continued for minutes that stretched like hours. Jack conserved ammunition, making each shot count. Harrington's men grew bolder, working their way closer to Jack's position, using the rocks for cover. Then a new sound, the hiss and pop of something burning. A choking cloud rose from behind Harrington's position. Smoke bombs! Jack shouted to Ahiga across the canyon. They're trying to smoke us out! The acrid fumes billowed upward, carried by the canyon's natural draft. Jack pulled a bandana over his nose and mouth, but his eyes stung and watered. Through the haze, he saw Harrington and his men moving forward, emboldened by their advantage. Cooper had managed to work his hands free during the chaos. Instead of running, he retrieved a small derringer from his boot. Jack watched in disbelief as Cooper took aim not at him, but at Norton, who was creeping toward Ahiga's position. The small pistol cracked. Norton went down, a look of surprise frozen on his face. Cooper ducked behind the cottonwood as Harrington's attention snapped toward the new threat. "Cooper, you treacherous snake!" Harrington roared. "Federal Marshal James Cooper Harrington," the traitor shouted back, holding up a badge that glinted in the sunlight. "I've been tracking you for months." Jack stared in disbelief. Cooper, a lawman in disguise? The revelation had barely registered when the surviving Cleaver brother charged Ahiga's position, knife drawn. Jack swung the Winchester around, but the smoke obscured his shot. He watched helplessly as Cleaver and Ahiga collided in a deadly struggle, their silhouettes visible through the haze. Harrington used the distraction to make his move, not toward Jack or Ahiga, but toward the northern cliff face, toward the cave and its arsenal. "He's going for the weapons!" Jack shouted, abandoning his position and sliding down the rocky slope. He landed hard, tucking into a roll and coming up with the Winchester at his shoulder. Harrington had reached the base of the cliff, searching frantically for the path Ahiga had shown Jack earlier. Jack raised the rifle, steadied his aim despite the burning in his lungs from the smoke. "Harrington," Jack called, stepping into the open. "It ends here." The gang leader turned slowly, his face a mask of hatred. Blood streamed from a wound on his forehead, but the determination in his eyes remained undiminished. "You should have minded your own business, Sawyer." Harrington's voice rasped from the smoke. "Those weapons would have made us kings out here. This became my business when you started killing innocent people." Jack kept the rifle steady. "Throw down your gun." Harrington's laugh was hollow. "You think this ends with me? There are others, men with power who protect men like me, the same ones who buried what happened at Antietam. I'm not interested in them. Just you." Jack stepped closer. "Your choice. Surrender or die." For a moment it seemed Harrington might actually surrender. Then his hand blurred toward his holster. Jack fired. The Winchester's report echoed off the canyon walls like a final judgment. Harrington staggered backward, a look of surprise crossing his features. He looked down at the spreading crimson stain on his chest, then back at Jack. "Always were. A better shot," he managed before collapsing to the dust. Silence descended on the canyon, broken only by the soft gurgle of the spring. Jack lowered the Winchester, suddenly aware of every ache in his body, every breath in his lungs. Ahiga approached, blood, not her own, staining her knife. Cooper limped behind her, clutching a wound in his side where Cleaver had managed to strike him before Ahiga ended the fight. "It's over," Jack said, more to himself than to them. Cooper shook his head, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "Not quite. The weapons." Jack exchanged glances with Ahiga. She nodded once, granting permission. "This way," Jack said, leading them toward the hidden cave. As Cooper examined the cache, his face grew serious. "These have to be secured, turned over to the army before they fall into the wrong hands." "And then what?" Jack asked. "More Harringtons use them against more innocent people?" Cooper sighed heavily. "I can't promise that won't happen, but I can promise justice for what Harrington did. My testimony, plus the evidence we've gathered, will ensure the truth comes out. About the massacres, about everything." Ahiga spoke, her voice carrying the weight of her people's suffering. Words and promises. "My people have heard many from men like you." "Not men like me," Cooper countered. "I've spent 3 years building this case, infiltrating Harrington's operation. Lost good friends doing it." He turned to Jack. "Help me finish this right." Jack considered the Winchester in his hands, the weapon that had served him faithfully through war and peace. Finally, he nodded. "We'll help you transport the weapons. After that, our debt is paid." As night fell, they buried the dead and tended their wounds. Cooper revealed more of his true mission, how the government had finally taken notice of Harrington's atrocities after pressure from Eastern newspapers and reformers. "What will you do now?" Cooper asked Jack as they sat by the fire. Jack glanced at Ahiga, who was preparing a poultice for Cooper's wound. "Haven't thought that far ahead. Been running too long. You could come back with me. The marshal's office could use a man with your skills." Jack shook his head. "My badge-wearing days are behind me." Later, as Cooper slept, Jack found Ahiga standing at the canyon's edge, looking out at the star-filled sky. "My debt to my people is paid," she said without turning. "Their sacred weapons will not bring more death to the innocent." "What will you do?" Jack asked, echoing Cooper's question to him. "This place," Ahiga gestured at the canyon surrounding them, "it has strong medicine, good water, game in the hills." She looked at him directly. "A place to stop running." Jack understood the invitation in her words. He had spent years drifting, carrying the weight of Sonora, of the war, of every time he'd walked away instead of standing firm. Perhaps it was time to lay that burden down. "It would take work," he said, "building shelter, preparing for winter." "I am not afraid of work," Ahiga replied, "or of winter." The next morning, they helped Cooper load the weapons onto the gang's abandoned horses. The marshal would escort the cash to the nearest army outpost, then return with men to document Harrington's crimes. As Cooper prepared to depart, he handed Jack a folded document. "Federal land grant. This canyon and 500 acres surrounding it. Payment for services rendered." Jack stared at the paper, then at Cooper. "You planned this?" Cooper smiled tiredly. "Let's just say I had a feeling about how things might turn out." He mounted his horse. "I'll be back in about 2 weeks. Try not to shoot me when I return." They watched him ride away, leading the pack horses laden with crated weapons. When the dust had settled, Jack turned to Ahiga. "Looks like we own a canyon," he said, the unfamiliar sensation of hope stirring within him. That evening, as the fire burned low, Jack reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a simple ring fashioned from a silver dollar he'd carried since the war. "My father made this for my mother when they homesteaded in Kansas," he said, turning it in his fingers. "Said a man should have roots somewhere, something to fight for beyond himself." Ahiga watched him, her expression unreadable in the firelight. "I've been carrying it for 20 years, waiting for the right time, the right place." Jack held the ring out to her. "I'm not asking for anything you don't want to give, but if you stay, I stay." Ahiga took the ring, examining it carefully. Then she slipped it onto her finger. No words were needed. Her decision was made. The sun rose the next day on two people who had lost everything except the will to survive. Now they had found something more. A chance to build rather than destroy, to plant roots instead of running. Jack hung the Winchester above the entrance to the shelter they began constructing that day. A reminder of the past, but no longer a necessity for every moment of survival. The canyon that had once been merely a hiding place would become a home. The unlikely allies would become family. And Jack Sawyer, who had spent a lifetime paying for the sins of others, would finally find the peace that had eluded him for so long. The Winchester could wait. Today was for living.